police in Las Vegas found themselves in the middle of a UFO mystery last month after
To us, big eyes. They have big eyes.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal? Or?
One of my partners said they saw something fall out of the sky too, so that's why I'm kind of curious.
What sign? I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Okay, hang on.
He's right.
Is he in your yard, sir?
Yeah, God, he's big.
Okay, what's he doing in your yard?
Mythical Legends Podcast with your host Daniel Barnett.
Mythical Legends Podcast. As usual, I have my dad Craig with us. Hi, Dad.
Hi, Daniel. How you doing, mate? You all right?
Yep, good. Today we have another amazing guest, founder of the Tactical Research Group, team member of Project Zubert, and co-host of Where's My Sage, a Taste of the Universe podcast, Mike Ann. Thank you for spending time with me today, Mike. How are you?
Good, Daniel, and I appreciate you inviting me along to be part of your journey.
You are very welcome. Where are you based, Mike?
I'm based in Western New York.
Oh, wow. Could you tell our listeners about the Tactical Bigfoot Research and how it got started and a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Tactical Bigfoot Research kind of came out of two different projects. I am a knife maker as a side hobby, and a few years back, I got involved with Steve Culls, the Squatch Detective, in his Bigfooting, and I would go along to different events with him, and I would bring some tactical gear and some knives and help instruct folks on some of the gear they should bring with them when they're out searching for illustrious cryptids, around the world, some of the safety gear and that. I got involved with finding the Bigfoot subject kind of a roundabout way after doing a Bigfoot search, after a friend was joking that he was related to Bigfoot. And when I did a local search, the local newspaper had an article right down the street from me. And it kind of snowballed from there. And I ended up, was out for some surgery during that time and came across a Bigfoot festival. And that's where I was introduced to Steve and some other folks and Seth Breedlove from Small Town Monsters. And it's been a continuing journey since then into the subject of Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and some other cryptids.
Oh, Mike, when you say you made knives, what do you mean? Like decorative knives, or is it like hunting knives? Or
tactical knives and chef's knives. So stuff for
amazing.
military, law enforcement, and chefs. So I have I also have a background in criminal justice and archaeology. So it's kind of my way of getting out after a long day and working with different materials, woods and metals and such.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, that sounds like an intriguing thing to do. So let me ask you this question: have you ever had a Bigfoot sighting, Mike?
I personally have not had a sighting. I've had multiple friends that have had sightings, and my interest keeps growing due to their sightings and witness sightings that folks I've talked to, and trying to use my background and some of the technological stuff that I'm into to help them with their journey, try to help them figure out what they might have saw in the woods. Like I said, with the knives as well, I'm also friends with a lot of folks that do a lot of survival shows and that kind of thing. So even hearing those military and law enforcement folks with their experiences, I've heard some screams in the woods. I've had some rock throws that I can't explain, all stuff that we kind of document for future endeavors.
Well, could you tell me a little bit more about that rock throw and the sounds that you heard? So
on one of my first events I went to, it was in Pennsylvania, here in the U.S., the Chestnut Ridge. We were down on a Eric Altman's Bigfoot camping adventure, and I was talking to another investigator. And during that time, while we were chatting. I asked him, if he'd seen some stuff, and at that point we had gotten a scream come out of the woods. Something I had never heard in that range or that volume. We reached out to some other groups that were in the area, asked anybody was doing any screams or knocks or anything, and they had not. And because it was a big family event, we had about 20 folks that were out there in the woods with us. So we had some kids and parents, and folks kind of got a little nervous. So we kind of brought everybody together and did some more. I got everybody circled up in the middle and made them do another big scream to kind of calm everybody down. We got some calls back. And as we walked out of the woods at that time, we found some impressions in the ground that were pretty good. The rock throw happened up in New York. I was out with Steve Culls and another investigator, and we were sitting on top of a mountain, and it was a rainy, cold, dreary night. And I was leaning across the top of an SUV, and I had a rock come skidding across the top of the car and pop me in the forehead, and then a second one. And in that time, of course, I looked up to make sure there were no pine cones or acorns or some other debris that might have come down and bounced off the hood. This kind of skidded across the hood. And then we got a couple more that hit the side of the car. We've got audio, no video, because technology the way it is. GoPro's the battery was kind of dying on that night. So we've upgraded some equipment since then. But it was definitely an interesting experience, that particular area. The folks I were with, they've had sightings in that area. Multiple folks I've talked to over the years have had sightings in the area, footprint casts and such. So,
when you heard that scream, were you scared?
I don't know if I was scared, but I was kind of taken aback by what we had heard in the volume. In my teens, I spent time volunteering at a local zoo, and that small park had basically the winter animal house, I want to call it. Those old style zoos, from the early turn of the century, where everything was kind of kept in one building. So on one side behind me, when I worked in their gift shop in the winter, and the summer I worked in the little mini zoo that they had great apes. And so you had a chimpanzee behind me, an orangutan, gibbons, spider monkeys, and then a seal on that side. And on the other side, they had some other big cats. So it's kind of used to their noises and sounds after, being there for quite a few years. So hearing the volume and consistency out of this was kind of very interesting to see what was going on in that area. Again, without seeing what produced that sound, it was very interesting, and it was definitely, you could feel it in your chest. So, I've heard elephants and seals and sea lions and, like I said, other big animals, but this was kind of different.
It must have been intriguing to be there when that sound was coming out.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry, Daniel, go ahead.
So what are the highlights of your career? So you've mentioned a bit, but what are the highlights?
I think the highlights of being out there are some of the folks I've met, some of the places I've been to, some of the folks I've got to work with on some different projects. I know you interviewed Amy Boo recently, and getting to meet Amy and her crew from ZooBook. Some of the other folks that are working on some of the new DNA studies that are coming out, like Dorby Olcott from North Carolina State University. That's a brand new DNA study that Darby and his team are working on. Getting to sit and talk with Doug Hychak and, bounce some ideas off of him. I'm always into looking at some tech. We've worked on a new hair color recognition thing that I've been working on after talking to some witnesses. So talking to somebody long distance here in the States, we've got a lot of what we call box stores, so big hardware stores that are national brands. And I don't know if you guys have, a national brand hardware store in the UK there, but if somebody, 100 miles away said I had a sighting, especially for you guys are doing the big cat thing now. We saw this particular color. Well, for me, I can send somebody to one of these name brand national stores and they can go find a paint sample in a particular color for a different special brand. And I can go to that local brand store in my area and look at that same color and get an exact idea if somebody says brown and what color brown they may be looking at. And working with a friend in Florida, Matt Larson from Central Florida Bigfoot, who's a photojournalist by trade and an artist, Matt suggested using Pantones. And now for us talking, across the ocean, if you got a copy of a Pantone chart, which is a industry standard on color, we could be looking at the exact same color around the world at the same time if we were interviewing witnesses. So developing some technology, working on use of thermal drones and thermal cameras and that kind of thing has really been my highlight. But it's been talking to the people and some of the friends I've made along the time and some of the projects that we've been using, including 3D scanning using your cell phone. If you've got a smartphone, you can use some 3D scanning apps to go out and look at prints instead of the old carrying 50 pounds of hydrocal or plaster in your backpack, which is still a wonderful thing to do. But if you travel like I do in the woods, usually is the security or the cameraman in the background, I usually don't want to have that extra plaster cast material with me. So I'll carry some of the scanning apps to take a look at those things.
It's quite good, especially for Daniel to hear about, the equipment. A lot of the time he asks about, he wants all the equipment to do it, but it's kind of like you don't need it. You just need to have the knowledge there, isn't it? To know what you're looking at a lot of the time. And I think Amy said that quite a bit as well. With technology, the way it is with apps and stuff, it makes it so accessible for everyone, doesn't it?
It really does. And I spent 20 years as a search and recovery diver, and some of that stuff that you start out with, just the simple search and rescue techniques that you can use, we call a circle search pattern, where you could take a known length of string, and when you find, like I said, I have a background in criminal justice, is making some little flags, like I have, just using some popsicle sticks and some bright colored tape. So when you do find something, you can put that as an evidence marker, and instead of going out and buying the really expensive evidence markers or flags, as we call them, and doing circle searches from that point so you find your next bit of evidence. You can do that again with a known piece of string or a cloth tailor's tape. That's a simple, easy thing, and a good old notebook. You don't have to have, the $4,000 thermal camera or the $10,000 drone to go out and do this. A good flashlight, a good string, and a good notebook, and you're good to go and keep great notes as you go along. But those apps, if you've got a smartphone or a tablet that'll allow you to do that, there's the Merlin Bird app. It's another one I tell folks all the time when they hear screams and stuff in the woods. You can use Merlin to kind of look and see what birds are in your area, or I hunt calls. So there's the tech is free. It's actually, the free apps, but what you have access in your area, in your region around the globe, kind of makes a difference. But Cornell University's down the street, well, not down the street, they're about 2 hours from me, but they have an amazing, a bird and Auburn or Audubon, setup there for the background on the birds.
And Mike, so I don't mean to go off topic, but what was your role in law enforcement?
I've done everything from search and rescue diving to underwater robot operators, now to drone operations, and done various other jobs with an agency. I can't really go into what agency.
No, of course not. Of course not.
Yeah.
Well, how did people react then when you go from kind of law enforcement into kind of the Sasquatch kind of research? Was there kind of did people kind of say, what you're doing? You know.
Yeah, I do get my chops busted quite a bit. But a lot of folks secretly are kind of interested in the subject, and I can kind of point them in a direction. But a lot of the tech that I use, I bring back to the folks I work with. So in case of search and rescue, like I said, I have big thermal cameras that I personally bought, and I spend quite a bit of time on those thermal cameras. So if we have a missing person or something like that, I can look at a thermal camera and say, that's probably, a deer or a bear or a mouse, not a human, in those things.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes, it keeps me up to date on my skills, those perishable skills like search and rescue stuff. Like you said, using circle search patterns or grid search patterns that we would look for evidence, or teaching, young folks when they're out in the woods, because we always say, oh, the print disappeared. And, I'm of the flesh and blood camp, not the woo camp. However, I do practice energy healing and some other things, and have a paranormal show. But some things learning to track those basic skills, outdoor skills, are very important that we can use. Again, I use back and forth on both sides, from the Bigfooting and to my career.
And I think that's been quite fascinating. I think when Daniel started this podcast, is hearing everyone's kind of different views on whether there's a link between Bigfoot and the paranormal, or whether it's, but you're more in the science camp. Yeah.
I am. The more I talk to folks, the more I get out with witnesses. It's always interesting to hear what they've seen and where they've been. And a lot of witnesses that I've talked to, they really do describe something that's more human than ape. And even if we go and we look at, different cultures around the world for years, it's a lot of times you'll hear they were people that were here before us. And even if you look at, yogis and how they can adjust their breathing to monks around the world and the different tones that they use. I've got a background in martial arts as well. I mean, the transfer and energy of power and stuff like that. I always joke about the old Bruce Lee 1-inch punch. I mean, being able to develop that energy and push, and getting to meet some of those people that were in class with him when he was studying, that energy is there. So we, human body can do some interesting things if we look at it.
It can be quite amazing, can't it? If you hear the stories of what the body can do when it's under stress or under pressure. And it's got to come from somewhere, hasn't it?
Yes. So the whole, where can we go? And if we go and we look at the color schemes of what are shown, and again, that's why I'm really pushing the color stuff. Go look at a gibbon, look at the early primates or the lower primates. Those colors are there. Those eye shines are there. That stuff's there. So for me, this has been kind of a journey to go look at this stuff. I have two friends that I go out with that are both biologists, and it's always an interesting education lesson for me every time I get out, because they're, PhDs or, have their masters and work in the biology fields. One of them is actually a professor. So I get an education every time I go out. Like, hey, what would you think of this? Well, that doesn't quite make sense, but yeah, this does work. So it's always an education on this journey.
And during that conversation, the bit that stood out to me was that as Dad said, I like the different scientific opinions. So your opinion is different to some of the that I've spoken to, and that's what I really like about doing this. That everyone's opinions is different about what Bigfoot could and what might be. That's really interesting, and the colors and all the equipment and how much effort goes into trying to find Bigfoot. And so could you tell us a bit about your podcast and how it got started?
So my podcast, Where's My Sage? I have a co-host, Christy London, who is a medium, and she is an amazing medium at that. We were introduced we were at a ghost hunt in New York, and she started getting a reading from my grandfather and describing him to a T, which kind of set me off. So I kind of freaked me out. So I kind of went outside to hang out with my buddy Steve. But she was looking at putting a show together. She has a background as an energy healer, as a Reiki master, and I was working on my stuff at that time. And I said, I can help you with a podcast. And we started putting one together because I was just doing the Bigfoot stuff a little bit. And we decided that we would join things together and talk about journeys in life and getting off the couch. So occasionally she'll do psychic readings on the show. I'll talk about Bigfoot. We'll talk to folks about just their life's journey. So we've talked to folks from the Naked and Afraid series, which I have a bunch of those friends that do that show from the knife community, and it's kind of interesting to hear about their experiences, sometimes even paranormal or Bigfoot experiences when they're out in the woods. To martial artists, we've had Jet Tila from the Food Network talking about his journey with cooking, and it's all, we can always learn from everybody and pick up different things along the way. So we never know who we're going to have on as a guest, but it's like I said, it's part of the journey, where we go and how we get there.
Before you had that, sorry, Daniel, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's all right.
So when you had that experience of her contacting your grandfather, was it your grandfather? Sorry, yeah, it was.
Yeah, it's my grandfather. Yeah,
yeah. So before that, did you have a belief in that, in the whole medium side, or was it that made you start believing in it?
So because of the Bigfoot community, I was introduced and brought on to a team that no longer is. We still kind of hang out together, but everybody kind of went their own different ways. They were all doing their own different TV shows and such. So I was kind of introduced to it a long time ago. It just happened to be that at this time it was something went there, and Christy has managed to hit on a couple of things that folks just don't know about. And she generally, a lot of our guests, she'll end up picking up on stuff for them. So every time she does that, it amazes me. We were just in Ohio 2 weekends ago working on an old house with another YouTube channel, and they had a witness that lived in the home, and it was really interesting to be able to film her and the witness at the same time, witness being in another room and verifying what she can do. So every time she kind of proves that, or it's like, okay, we're going to keep going with this,
because I always think it's one of those things that kind of have to happen to you in order, it's the one thing I feel that I struggle with slightly, and I don't know why, but I feel that if it happened to me, then it would hit me quite hard. When you watch these things on TV and you see the different things and you hear the stories, you go, there's always that doubt, but when it actually happens to you, that must have been just mind-blowing.
Well, I'm the debunk guy, part of our team. So we do some paranormal investigations as well. So like I said, I'm a gear guy, but I'm carrying thermometers and testers and everything else. And I want to know where all the infrastructure is in the house, because, we heard a bump in the night, or we got cold. Okay, well, where's the crack in the wall? Where's, where's the heat? Where's that? And it's the same thing when we go out, with doing the Bigfoot thing or looking for something, in the water. It's knowing what animals are in the area. That's why, like I said, I'm big on carrying some of the apps with me, or sound recordings, and coming back and re-looking at the data and keeping it down there, because is it X, Y, or Z? I mean, you're going to hear small things, small mice, chipmunks, squirrels, armadillos, in your case, probably hedgehogs making noise. It sounds like a freight train's coming down the wall, when it could actually be, something small like that, where a bear or a moose could be moving through the woods and you won't hear them. And that
Mm.
actually happened to us in the Adirondack Park where we were filming for a different YouTube channel. And 2 people with night vision didn't see the bear, but 2 of us with thermal cameras were like, you guys are walking right up on it, and they couldn't hear it.
Wow.
But,
Wow.
you know, the other animals that were in the area, the raccoons and other stuff, were like, wow, you know, there's a freight train coming down the thing. I mean, that's what you got to look at. You got to look at the big picture of how you can debunk it, and the stuff you can't debunk, you put it in a notebook or your recording software, your Excel sheet, and say, okay, I can go back and look at that somewhere down the line.
And I think that's been the kind of my role when Daniel started on this journey of his, you know, having interest in Bigfoot and stuff, and I was purely here to kind of, you know, make sure everything he's doing is okay, talking to people on the internet. You know, I'm a dad at the end of the day. And it's kind of I've always been the thing of debunking, but then I found when talking to people on this podcast that there's just some stuff that I cannot explain, and there's stuff that you know, when he's saying, you know, what's my thoughts on it, and I'm like, do you know what, I don't know, and it's quite good, the chemistry between me and Daniel, because he's very much, you know, on that, you know, the world is wide open to our thoughts, and I'm constantly trying to go, yeah, but. And I'm finding it harder and harder to kind of give him an excuse.
Craig, that's what I say. You keep that notebook or, you know, Microsoft Access. You know, you find a database software where you can go ahead and say, man, this doesn't make any sense at all. You know, we started doing the UV hair collection project where I was trying to film my co-host using different color lights when we were out doing the paranormal investigations. And I finally bounced across, you know, trying some UV light, which is not good to shine at people. So don't do that.
No.
But you're going to see some different, looking at lights underneath different digital filters, you're going to get some different reactions. So we had, you know, I had talked to Doug Hychek on a couple of things, and then we had him on as a guest. And I said, hey, Doug, I go, have you ever tried looking at some hair under UV light? And he's like, yeah, I've done a lot of it. I said, well, have you ever put it with a camera filter? And he did. And he's got some hair that's done some interesting stuff. Well, from that, I've gotten a hold of taxidermists and other folks and getting known animal samples to kind of compare against. So when we do find those unknown hair samples, we've got to, you know, started to build a small database. And that's the big thing about doing this is the collection of data. Like I said, not everything that goes bump in the night is going to be X, Y, or Z. You know, get yourself, if you can, find a UV light or different color lights, especially if you're working in different areas. It's amazing what the floral and fauna will do underneath those different lights. I mean, finding different mosses and other stuff that you're not going to catch, and getting to know your cameras. For folks that are like, everything is orbs when they're filming with an iPhone. The iPhone sensors just pick up a lot better on a lot of dust and other anomalies. Just the way that the CMO sensors are.
Your job, Mike, sounds incredible. From the colors of the hair to the equipment to everything, and listening to your stories is actually changing some of my thought process as well from a scientific point. So how did you get involved with Project Zoobook?
I had met Amy through an event, and then we had Amy on as a guest on our show, and it was one of those kind of things. And then I met her also through, you know, did some stuff and talking to Shane Corson. So somebody kind of roundabout knew some folks that were involved. And then Amy was nice enough to extend an invite to myself and my partner, who stays unknown because of his job. So
and some of the people that you've mentioned are really nice, because I know them through other means.
It seems like there's the community is just so embracing, isn't it, of everyone, which is fantastic. And I think Daniel's met so many so many people through this community, and from help with Amy and from Amy and yourself, and given time to him to investigate this is I can't be more grateful.
Well, the big thing is we can learn from everybody, and someone young like Daniel may see something and be able to hear things that the rest of us that were so direct with our jobs and our backgrounds that sometimes we miss. I always say when we talk to a witness, really find out what they do for a living, because that truck driver, that lorry driver at 3:00 in the morning making a delivery is going to know his route and what happens. He's going to see something different in nature than the artist or the photographer may see colors and shapes. To the police investigator or the sniper is going to look at things tactically in a different direction, or the doctor is going to look at structural stuff, or that chef might smell something different. I mean, so pulling from each of those backgrounds or talking to different folks when you're out there, you're going to learn so much. So again, having a next generation come up is awesome. I know Amy had Lauren Smith on a list for you to talk to as well, and she does a lot with the youth and getting kids involved. And if we can get kids involved in science and all this, you are our next generation. So we're here to help pass, because you may find something. Your interest in this may bring something down the line in some other product or something else in your career field.
Yeah. And I certainly hope that is the case. So what are your thoughts on programs like Expedition Bigfoot? Do you think their research is vital to the Bigfoot community?
I mean, the thing with the TV shows, one, you got to look at production. So they're making a product. They've got to sell a product. But it also gets folks involved. I love Mountain Monsters, which we know is an entertainment show, but that gets a lot of my coworkers. That was kind of like a break-in for folks. But Finding Bigfoot or Expedition Bigfoot, they're getting some of the stuff out there. Unfortunately, for some of those, with everybody going out and doing the knocks and the screams and everything like that. Now, if you go to an area, everybody's doing knocks and screams. So you pretty much got to write a lot of that off now because of the TV shows. But there are groups doing some stuff, and they're putting things out there. I've talked to the folks on a lot of those shows, through socials and stuff like that, or different conferences. And again, it brings it out into the forefront.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting opinion that also I think Dad as well.
I think it's just the dramatization of it, and I always compare it to. I'm a big music guy, and we have a program over here that used to be on called X Factor. It was very if you think American Idol style kind of thing. Now it's very kind of produced, and it's not my sort of thing. But at the end of the day, it puts music back into the schools because the kids are talking about it. So whatever gets that subject out there is good, in my opinion. I just think sometimes it's the dramatization of it that they have to make it kind of interesting week to week, that me and Daniel were talking about, take everything with a pinch of salt as such. They want you to tune in next week. I'm not saying that their research isn't vital to what they're doing, but they want you to watch. So there must be kind of, that sort of thing to it.
Well, if there's anything, when you're going out to do this, you're going to find you're sitting in the woods for hours and you may or may not see anything. Like I said, my research partner and I, we get out quite a bit, and he's an amazing biologist. But do we find something every time we go out? No. But we say if we can find something interesting. I mean, we found the old Vietnam era Jolly Green giant helicopter once in the middle of a field. A giant steel dragon somebody had made. But there's a lot of other little things, just some of the nature and being out there with the friends. I mean, here's another great thing. I mean, you guys right now are proof of it. You've got a father and son team working together, not sitting on a couch, one playing video games and the other one just reading the paper. You're working. It's helping to bring families back together again. And I guess that's when I do my presentations, that's a big thing, is get your friend. What are the benefits of getting out there and Bigfooting? Do we find something? Maybe. I mean, we look at the folks, like the Bluff Creek Project, to put all their cameras up, and they found the Humboldt or rediscovered the Humboldt Martin. But getting out with friends, getting out in nature, exercising, not sitting on the couch. So is there benefits to these shows? Yeah, there's a lot of benefits to those. I mean, we've been talking about 3D scanning. They're showing some of the bigger 3D scanners that are out there, and carrying a big laptop with you is not always the best thing in the world, but you're getting better data. As long as that data is collected, it's awesome. I mean, if you look at Scott from the Bigfoot Mapping Project, there's somebody that took a GIS background, and that's data collection to use for a map for folks. Or, like I said, the scanning stuff that's out there. Amy and the team with ZooBook, I mean, it's there. And if we got this next generation, Craig, you letting Daniel do the show is awesome, that you guys are talking to folks and getting that information out there. So.
So following on from that, Mike, do you believe in the Patterson-Gimlin tape? So
I'm still trying to figure out on that one. The jury's still out. Talking to folks that are, talk to those that were there. It's one thing. I grew up in Rochester, New York, the home of Kodak. So, it's, I'm a generalist. But I have a friend that's, like I said, his background is in photography and that, and looking at it that way. But then you talk to Dr. Meldrum and what he sees, and everybody kind of looks at things at a different thing. The biggest problem that we're going to run into with that film right now is AI and what damage that's going to do to what is there. And when we talk to a lot of witnesses, what they describe is different than what Patty, is. So it's always interesting, and there's no other film. There's no other comparison. So that's, it's an anomaly in itself. But, like I said, some folks have done some things, and until we have a body on a table, we're going to kind of keep guessing on what's there.
So what advice would you give to someone like me who started to research Bigfoot?
Read as much as you can. Try to find articles that are pre-internet. Yeah. Pre-internet. Pre-YouTube, pre-TikTok. Not that, pre-socials.
I think me and Daniel had a long conversation the other day about this when he was showing me the Gimlin tape and some other things on YouTube. And I think my kind of thing was, if someone knows they're going to make some money or get some views from it, it's, you can pretty much create anything nowadays. Yeah. Me and Daniel could spend the afternoon and go out and recreate some sort of sighting with the amount of technology we have. And this is one of the things I was saying to Daniel about looking at, where it's come from, who are we going to speak to that has nothing to gain, but apart from telling their story.
So, coming from my background, it's always follow the money. I have socials, my numbers. I don't push them as much. Like I said, I put our podcast together more for my co-host. But the clickbait that's out there, and something you're going to see, Daniel, when you go and do the research, is that the same films will recirculate about every 3 to 5 years.
Mhm.
Anytime there's a new social media platform that comes up, those films and videos will recirculate back through. But knowing how to go in and look at things, again, and now with AI, it's going to make things just 5 times harder. I was very blessed by the teams I got in with Steve, and then with Nesra, and then the Pennsylvania crew, folks that were there back when the original online platform started. So, and again, using my background, how you go in and look at the metadata that's on a photo or video, taking the old blob squatch or the paragolia stuff where the red circle comes out, taking those videos and that have that red circle and changing them to a negative look, so you can look at things as a negative. I suggested that to my buddy Matt there in Florida just recently, and now that's what he's doing halfway through his videos. He's cycling that. He'll have a green and do a comparison video of where he's used Adobe to put a negative of the image up, video up, and the live color. And I mean, that makes a big thing on where the colors set, what you can do in camera editing, out of camera editing. But again, look for those videos, but go back to look at some of those things ahead of time, and go back to those old sightings are really a great place to start. And historical accounts. I mean, I know I can go back to a historical account locally that was written in a local a book about the area and culture saying that there was something here prior than the native people that were here ahead of time, the indigenous folks that were here. So looking for that older stuff is sometimes important, but again, looking for that clickbait too sometimes is something that's very important as well. Somebody goes from no followers to 16,000 followers in a week, and you're like, they've got one video up. Well, how did that happen? Did they buy views, and is it a video that's already been out there? Take that photo, run it through, Google Lens or TinEye or one of those other programs that are out there. And this is the best thing I tell folks all the time. Folks with disabilities that can't get out in the woods, I said the best thing you can do is the computer work on the background, doing audio or researching the video and photos that are out there to see if they've already been out and running around the net already.
Yeah, and I think that is some really good advice for someone like me who started to investigate this mysterious ape-like creature. So, Mike, my last question for you is: how can our listeners follow your fascinating work?
You can find me on almost all the socials except for TikTok at Tactical Bigfoot Research or Where's My Sage.
Amazing. I really, really appreciate you coming on this podcast, Mike, and thank you very, very much for giving up your time. And I hope to speak to you soon. Okay, guys. I will see you in the next podcast. Okay, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mike. That was brilliant, mate. That was absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for giving up your time for him.
No problem. Daniel or Craig, anytime, reach out to me. Daniel, you've got my private stuff now, so
yeah,
just reach out there, and anything you got, I'll walk you guys through. I'll help you point you some directions.
That's brilliant. Thank you so
much,
Mike.
Thanks.
Thank you,
have
Mike.
A great day.
All the best. Cheers, mate.
Bye.
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 Bye.